Greetings, Benjamin J. from BENZTRAINZ with another in the series. Well, continuing my experiments with the ammeter and this Mighty Max 12-volt battery. On the rail, I've got the Lionel 2036 with magnet traction, and of course, the same consist that I've been using with all the other testing. So, the 8410 pulls a quarter amp, approximately. We're going to find out what the 2036 pulls. Now, this is substantially heavier and it has magnet traction. So we're going to see what it takes to run the 2036. So we'll get this going. So this is pulling less than 1 amp. Get a decent speed going here on the rail. A bit faster, I think. Let's try that. And that's clipping along pretty good. So about 1.1 to 1.4 amps, something like that. So average is about 1 amp that this thing is drawing. So the 2036 on this battery will run 5 continuous hours, approximately. Of course, no one's going to run a 2036 for 5 continuous hours. The thing is, I'm just trying to determine the actual run time for average locomotives on this little battery. So, 5 amp hour battery, this is drawing 1 amp, it will run for approximately 5 continuous hours. It's a lot of run time on this little battery. This is a tiny little battery. As you see, it's averaging between 0.96 and 1.1, it looks like. So again, it's a lot of runtime off that little battery. So this works. There's absolutely no doubt about that. Now, surprisingly, Marx pulls exponentially more power. The Marx Mercury pulls 2.4 amps. The Lionels pull surprisingly less. So it's got to be the design of the motor, because these are substantially heavier than the Marx motors, and they're drawing half the amount of power. As you see, this is still averaging less than 1 amp. That's a 2036 with magnet traction. This locomotive will pull anything. I mean, within reason, this thing will pull anything you can put behind it. And it's running at 0.91 amps right now. Of course, as they get warm, they pull less power, because the bearings expand and the oil thins out from the heat. So you see, it's pulling less than it did when we started. But like I said, the Marx motors pull substantially more. In fact, let's swap this out and put a Marx motor on. So there's the Lionel 2036. Now this weighs about, 3 pounds. Here we have a Marx 400. This is that one we built the other day. So we'll throw this one on, and you'll see a tremendous difference in the power consumption. So get this one running. So 1.2 amps. On a Marx 400. Now that weighs 2 pounds less, and it's drawing more power than the 2036. So the Marx motor is not as efficient as the Lionel motor. That's interesting to note. So the Marx 400 will run, 4.5 hours, something like that, non-stop, drawing 1.2 amps currently. Like I said, I put the Marx Mercury on, it drew 2.3 amps. Of course, it is a much, much older locomotive. So constant about 1.2 amps. Anyway, this battery can supply 5 amps for an hour or 1 amp for 5 hours. So this Marx 400 will run 4.5 hours, 5 hours about. nonstop on this little tiny battery. So you can imagine what happens if you connect this to a full-size car battery. 600 amps, 1200 amps. It'll run it for a week. Anyway, I just wanted to do a experiment to document what these things are actually pulling. So about 1.2 amps for a Marx 400, about 1 amp for the 2036, and less than that, surprisingly, for the 2025. And the 2025 is at least a pound heavier than the 2036. So anyway, it's an interesting experiment, no doubt. So these batteries are efficient for running these trains. There's no doubt about that. So for doing a demonstration of some kind when there's no power available, these batteries will work. And even though this one is really small, it'll still run some of these locomotives for 5 hours. It'll run this locomotive for 20 hours. It's actually quite amazing. Anyway, just continuing my experiments with the running these model trains on batteries with this little 12-volt controller. This works. It's efficient. And like I said, the only advantage it has is that you don't need AC power. You can run these trains anywhere. You could set up a layout on the beach in the middle of the desert. It doesn't make any difference. You don't need AC power to run them. They run really, really well, and they're actually quite efficient running on a battery. Anyway, it was an interesting experiment. It works. There's no doubt about that. So I just want to do a quick video to document this. As always, you have any questions, feel free to drop me a line, BENZTRAINZ@gmail.com. And as always, thank you for watching.